Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and we are 48 hours away from week 2 for the New York Giants. Season's over, so we appreciate everybody who is tuning in and watching on YouTube and listening on all your favorite podcast platforms. We'll introduce ourselves. We are All In, myself, producer Paul Wood, for NorthJersey.com and The Record, part of the USA Today network. For all of those of you flooding in to try to get all the brand new information from the 0-1 Giants off of week 1 that was built on optimism and encouragement and a fan base and media that covers this team that believes one game at a time, well, you've probably come to the wrong place, or at least the right place for me, wrong place for the entire team. So, New York Giants 0-1, Dallas Cowboys 0-1, an early kickoff, noon on Sunday from Jerry's World in Arlington, Texas. Can the Giants shock the world, so to speak, put one really bad game behind them, the 21-6 loss to Washington, and surprise everyone, even their record, beat Dallas for the first time since 2016 when Ben McAdoo was the head coach, when Sterling Shepard caught his first career touchdown, and when Victor Cruz caught the game winner at AT&T Stadium. It's been 13 tries in a row that the Giants have failed to beat the Cowboys with Dak Prescott at quarterback. So let's set the stage. It's Friday. We just finished up in our media viewing period at practice. Giants injury report will come out in a little while. I want to give you a couple stories from the assistant coach car wash this morning. And I talked to Andre Patterson, defensive line coach, about Darius Alexander, and talked to Shea Tierney, the quarterback's coach, passing game coordinator, about Jackson Dart. So let's talk about that, but also let's talk overview. All right. Number one, everyone wants to know about Andrew Thomas. Will Andrew Thomas play on Sunday? I think we're probably waiting and staring at a week 3 Sunday Night Football against the Chiefs as Thomas's debut. But here's what you have to remember. Andrew Thomas, and he spoke about this, did not have a preseason, did not have a training camp. So getting back from a Liz Frank surgery, even though it was last October, is a lot for a man who's 300 plus pounds, is really heavy on his feet, and those are legitimate reasons. They're not excuses as to why maybe it's taken a little longer for Thomas to get back from the Liz Frank injury. That being said, when you don't have the preseason and you don't have training camp, they've got to come up with ways to try to simulate it as much as they can. So last week, when Andrew Thomas had the fully padded practice on Wednesday, took Thursday as a day to work with the training staff, and then Friday did his first team reps in shells, he was listed as doubtful on the injury report. This week, Andrew Thomas took Wednesday, which was the fully padded practice day, and worked with the training staff. And then he practiced yesterday, even though it was in shells, did team reps. Today he's practicing in team reps, according to Brian Dable, again in shells, and then they'll make a determination after the game. My guess would be Andrew Thomas is listed as doubtful again for Sunday. Could it be questionable? Maybe. Maybe it's a 50-50, but I think they're probably leaning towards doubtful. I would imagine that the plan next week will be for him to practice all 3 days. Get the fully padded practice, then practice Thursday and Friday in shells and see what they've got. You know, you're trying to mix and match to try to test him the best you can. The big thing this week was back-to-back practices. So they really won't know how Thomas reacts until tomorrow if he gets a full workload. Now he's listed as a limited participant in practice yesterday. We're going to see how it works out. But I gotta say, I'm surprised that so many have gone down the route of Andrew Thomas is soft. What's taking him so long? Why isn't he out there on the field? He's protecting himself. He's getting paid. I've heard all of this. I've gotten messages about all of this. I just don't think that's fair to Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas, 2 years ago, let's go back, roll it back, the hamstring injury that he suffered on the blocked field goal against the Cowboys in the rain at MetLife in the season opener. Thomas tries to chase down blocked field goal, gets hurt, pulls his hamstring on the play, and then stays in the game. And I remember fielding a lot of questions from people. Why would Andrew Thomas stay in the game? It's a 40-0 blowout. Well, when he got injured, it wasn't 40-0, and he was trying to gut it out. Then he missed the next couple weeks, ended up back in practice, and re-injured his hamstring. So was out again. Again, Andrew Thomas pushing through an injury to try to get back on the field. Then last year, happened in the game against the Bengals, Sunday Night Football. Thomas cracks the Liz Frank in his foot, has a Liz Frank injury, a midfoot sprain, bad injury, plays through it, guts it out for a season that essentially was still on the downswing and ended up with only 3 wins along the way. Andrew Thomas is trying to be smart about this. The Giants are trying to be smart about this. You're talking about a young cornerstone on this team. They're not going to rush him into an injury. Are they being too cautious? Maybe. Maybe he could push through it and be fine on Sunday. But I just think that the reaction and the overreaction is it's Andrew Thomas is not the reason why the Giants lost and the offensive line did not look good in Washington. So I'm just going to say that. I also think that I wouldn't jump to conclusions immediately about, well, he didn't practice with full pads this week, so they got to get him in full pads before he gets out there on the field. If he feels good enough today, maybe the Giants decide to push it to Sunday and say questionable, work him out before the game, knowing that they're not going to have him, but just give him that opportunity. Maybe they do that. But it remains to be seen. So if I had to guess right now, I'd say Andrew Thomas will not play Sunday, but I do believe that the plan will be for next week to practice all 3 days and get back on the field in week 3 for the home opener against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's where we're at with Andrew Thomas. Couple things for receivers. I think Wan'Dale Robinson with his ankle is good to go. Darius Slayton is something to watch. Came out of practice with a groin injury yesterday, or a groin issue. Was seen during the media viewing period trying to loosen up. I think that's something to keep an eye on. Maybe he's listed as questionable on the injury report. If Slayton can't go, I think Bo Collins is next up, the undrafted rookie. And Brian Dable was asked about him today, and he basically said, look, he's a smart kid. He can do a lot of different things. So they like him in the run game. I've told you that. He brings that physicality that maybe they're not getting from a couple different guys on that offense. So that's what they'll look for that. Let's see. What else we got? I don't expect Xavier Gibson to be an option this Sunday. Claimed on waivers yesterday. I think maybe they look ahead to next week and see if they can work him in. Brian Dable's reasoning was we like the talent. And they claimed him through the front office and through Michael Gobriel, the special teams coordinator. He was with him with the Jets when he was a rookie. So they like him. They see talent. They want to bring him in and see what they can get. It does seem like a little bit of duplication with Gunnar Olszewski and Amir Smith-Marset both on the roster. But let's be honest. Either one of those guys has not proven to be a mainstay here. So if Gibson could come in and show some things, I think the Giants might like what they've got for him, a 24-year-old, going forward. Obviously, the one thing you don't like, 10 fumbles in 32 games in his career. But Olszewski had a fumbling problem, and that's why Pittsburgh got rid of him after he went there from New England. And then the Giants brought him here, and Gunnar has done a good job until then to kind of show that yes, everybody is going to, you're going to fumble from time to time, but it's not a situation where you've got fumbleitis where you're fumbling every time you touch the football. All right, let's talk assistant coaches for this weekend. Talked about Darius Alexander. What's the deal? Darius Alexander, third-round pick from Toledo, got a lot of high marks from the Giants. We've been raving about him. He gets into the preseason, and the criticism starts. He doesn't look right. He doesn't look as good. He's a bust, all this stuff. So I went straight to Andre Patterson and started asking him about Darius Alexander. Here's what I got from Andre Patterson, who is essentially a straight shooter. I mean, out of any of the coaches on this coaching staff, assistants-wise, he is a straight shooter. And Dre Patterson said he'll play when I think he's ready. And he admitted that there's a little bit of a push and pull from the front office and the scouting department wanting to know how come the third-round pick is not playing, how come he's not ready. And Dre Patterson said, look, I'm here. I've done this a long time. You've got to trust me. Trust me that I would not have the kid inactive if I thought he could be the player that he is or that we believe he could be. And he said, he used a flower analogy and said, we think he can be a big, beautiful flower, but we've got to give him time to grow. And, he talked about Danielle Hunter, who he coached in Minnesota, and said he's one of the best pass rushers of his generation, Danielle Hunter. He said, when I had him, he was inactive for the first 5 games. I've told you, I wrote about this last week, Michael Strahan was inactive for the first 5 games of his career. Couldn't beat out the veterans. All of a sudden, Michael Strahan, we know he earned his spot in Canton and is a Giants legend. So sometimes it takes a little time. You've got to trust the coaches that you trust. And I think when it comes to Dre Patterson and his resume, I think you have to trust it. Now, I did also ask Andre Patterson. I said the last time we had assistant coaches, going in, I planned on asking him about Darius Alexander, what we saw on tape in the preseason game. He was lining about 1.5 yards up off the line of scrimmage. What was he doing? What was the deal? And then I got caught up with other things and forgot to ask Andre Patterson. Well, for those of you who wanted to know, here's the answer. Andre Patterson lit him up on the sideline. When he saw it, when he got to the sideline, said, what are we doing? It was an example of a rookie thinking that he was going to try out some things that may have worked against Central Michigan and say, you know what, we're going to do what we can. I did this and I had success in college. Let me try it out in a game. So it was totally off script. It was Darius Alexander trying to see if things that he did in college would work. Got to the sideline, and Dre Patterson told me after the first 2 series, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? And Darius gave him the answer that I just gave you, and he said, no, we don't do that. That's not what we do. We need to trust our plan. That is not going to work in the NFL. And that'll likely be the last time you'll ever see Darius Alexander thinking. And it wasn't in a bad way. It wasn't in an ego way, the way Dre Patterson described it to me. He said, the kid was trying to do something to become a better player in that moment. He thought he would be able to have an impact in the game by doing what he was doing. And really all he was doing was giving him more of an advantage to the offensive lineman that had to block him. So that's the Darius Alexander story. Dre Patterson brought up the Danielle Hunter situation, talked about how the 5-game inactive situation, and then Hunter has been a dude ever since. I don't think Alexander will play this weekend. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. But Patterson said, look, we've seen changes already in practice from week 1 to week 2. He said the biggest thing is convincing upstairs, but also convincing the player that this is the plan we have for you. We're not telling you that you're not going to become what we think you can be. He said it's just a matter of finding patience, and it's not easy. By the same token, on the flip side of the argument, Dexter Lawrence. Obviously, congratulations to Dex and his wife, Donna, the birth of their first child. Dex missed practice on Wednesday. He was back yesterday. People wanted to know, first game, Dex, is he back to full strength? Is Dex there? And Andre Patterson said, look, the bottom line is I'd be doing Dex a disservice if I put him out there. Because I said to him, I said, look, you've got an all-pro. And, I got to imagine you want him on the field as much as possible. And Dre Patterson said, I have the best defensive tackle in football. He said, you don't think it would be easy for me to put him out there and just ride with it and say, Dex, go be Dex? He said, it has to be a little bit of a process here. We've got to work him back up to a full snap count. He had the spring off. They took it easy and eased him in the training camp. So they're aware of the Dexter Lawrence situation. And they want Dexter to be at full strength before they put him out there for every snap and say, go be yourself. Because then it'll be to his detriment. And you don't want the guy getting hurt. You don't want him pushing too hard. You don't want teams being able to take advantage of one of the best, if not the best, defensive tackles the Giants have ever had. So you got to see how that plays out as well. All right, so that was the story with Darius Alexander, defensive line coach. Let's talk a little bit about Jackson Dart. And Russell Wilson will start again on Sunday. Where will it go? Will Russell Wilson be the starter in week 3? Well, you got to see how week 2 plays out. I'll tell you one thing. I do not believe that Brian Daboll has that itchy finger right now. I don't think he's looking to pull the trigger, bench Russ, and put Jackson Dart in the game. So what is Jackson Dart doing in order to be able to move his development forward? Well, we talked to Shea Tierney, as I said, quarterback's coach, passing game coordinator. And I said to Shea, what do they do? Daboll mentioned the other day how the first team offense will run their script in practice. That's mostly Russell Wilson. So what does Jackson do to kind of speed that up? Because he'll have an opportunity. If he has to go in the game, he's got to be able to know some of the plays that were in the game plan for that week. He said, well, there are several facets to it. He said, number one, after practice, Jackson Dart and Jameis Winston go with guys on the side field and run through the script. So exactly what they're doing during practice with Russell Wilson and the first team offense, that's what Jackson Dart and to an extent Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston are doing after practice. And I said to him, is it with you? Do you put it on the guys to do it? He said, well, really, it's on the guys. Like, you got to get the guys to understand how important of a role this plays in their development. He says, so Chad Hall, the assistant quarterback's coach, will run it after practice, and it'll be those guys running it with other guys. Whoever wants to be out there, whether it's guys from the first team or it's people from the practice squad, that's the way they work it out. So other than that, Jackson Dart meets with Brian Daboll every week to go over film. The one other thing that Tierney said is that session that they do after practice, running through the script, is also video. So when they have that copy, they can actually go into meetings with Jackson Dart and Jameis Winston and look at how they ran those plays as opposed to how Russell Wilson ran them with the first team. So the ascension of Jackson Dart is going on behind the scenes as things are transpiring. So as Tierney said, he's one chin strap away. And, obviously the traditional phrase is one snap away. But I thought it was kind of interesting, that chin strap. It's basically, if the starter has to take his helmet off, that's it. Next guy going in, it's you, Jackson. So it's going to be interesting. We're supposed to talk to Jackson today. So we'll have more of that on our post-game pod on Sunday night. But I thought you guys would appreciate the things that Jackson is doing behind the scenes. And, taking mental reps in practice, running some of the scout team, but also after practice, running through the entire script that Russell Wilson and the first team offense are using in a given game plan. Yesterday was red zone and third down. Today's a mix of everything. First and second down are usually on Wednesday with the fully padded practice. So Giants-Cowboys. I said to you last week, I've written this. The greatest disparity in the NFL is week 1 to week 2. Crazy things happen. Washington last year lost by 17 points to Tampa Bay. Jaden Daniels couldn't throw the ball. Ran for, I think, 80 yards against Tampa, but couldn't throw the ball. Washington was coming off of a 4-win season. Nobody thought Washington would turn into what they did last season. Now, it's not creating a parallel with the Giants. It's just creating the unknown going into week 2, not really knowing how a team will go from week 1 to week 2. So, will it be a closer game on Sunday with the Giants and the Cowboys? Remains to be seen. I think the Cowboys win. I am not going to pick the Giants until they prove me wrong. Picked them last week, and they proved me wrong. So that's where we're at. I think we pretty much got everything covered today, so we appreciate, as always, you being all in. For those of you who wanted to know about the Darius Alexander situation, there's your rundown. I think I'm going to have something on Abdul Carter on Sunday morning, so look for that on NorthJersey.com. I'll push it out early just in terms of the Abdul Carter experience. What's it like? How do they decide? How do they divvy up snaps? How do they get him more snaps? All important as we move forward into week 2 for the New York Giants. So we will be on a plane to Arlington, Texas on Saturday. We'll be there Sunday from inside AT&T Stadium. Best place to watch a game in the entire league. Really enjoy going to Jerry World. I've seen Giants wins there. I've seen a lot of Giants losses there. So it'll be interesting to see how this team responds to what they showed. Now, do we see Jackson Dart? I think if the Giants have a first half the way they had in Washington, I think you might see Jackson Dart on Sunday, looking for a spark. But when that happens, it's very important. That begins the timeline for Jackson Dart. And there are a lot of people on this team going into week 1, and even after that still believe in Russell Wilson. And the players are the ones you have to worry about in the locker room. It's not that you can't sell Jackson Dart. But right now, Russell Wilson has been sold as the present, and Jackson Dart has been sold as the future. If you're going to sell that to the locker room, you better be sure. Or coming off a 3-win year, and now 0-1, maybe 0-2, going into Kansas City and the Chargers, back-to-back at home. It's just things to think about. And if I know a fan base, if the Giants don't win this week, that is not going to be a fun environment to be in next Sunday night. It's going to be a lot of red, a lot of Swifties, a lot of people wearing blue looking to boo if Russell Wilson is under quarterback and puts up a performance like he did in week 1 in Washington. So everybody try to enjoy your weekend. Enjoy some college football tomorrow. We will be all over it on Sunday. If player arrivals are your thing, make sure you check me out on TikTok. It's Art Stapleton across the board. On Twitter, X, and Instagram, it's Art_Stapleton. We'll have everything on NorthJersey.com for your game day experience. After the game, we will grade one player, one of the bigger names on the team. So we'll see how that works out. Last week was Abdul Carter. Worked out pretty well. I got great feedback from you, the consumer, the reader. So we will continue to do that this week. And that's where we're at. So on to Jerry World, on to Arlington. And the formerly known as, or on the outskirts of Big D, be the Giants and the Cowboys, another iteration of this rivalry. Can the Giants finally beat Dak Prescott? Haven't done it since Dak's rookie year, as I said, when Ben McAdoo was the Giants coach and Sterling Shepard was a rookie. For Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Thanks for reading. Thanks for being on NorthJersey.com. Thanks for following me on all of the social channels. I appreciate you watching here on YouTube. I do read your comments. I want to hear all the feedback for the show, but that's where we're at, and we will move forward together, all in, into week 2 for the New York Giants.